The plane buzzed with the usual mix of restless energy as passengers hurried to locate their seats. Among them was a young woman named Amelia Brooks. In her late 20s, Amelia moved through the aisle with quiet confidence, casually dressed in a light jacket and dark jeans, carrying a small, discreet carry-on bag. Her soft, unassuming demeanor drew brief, curious glances from passengers who noticed her youthful appearance and relaxed style, at odds with the usual formality of the first-class cabin. Reaching her seat, Amelia settled into the plush, cushioned window seat, exhaling softly in relief. The past weeks had been relentless. Countless meetings, late nights, and demanding decisions. For Amelia, this flight was more than just transportation. It was a rare moment of calm, a brief escape from the constant pressures of managing a major airline. As she leaned back comfortably, Amelia caught a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision. A flight attendant, sharply dressed in the airline's crisp uniform, approached with purposeful strides. Her name was Veronica Mills. Tall, authoritative, with piercing eyes that quickly assessed Amelia from head to toe. Amelia felt the unmistakable weight of the woman's gaze, a slight but uncomfortable scrutiny. "Excuse me, miss," Veronica began, her voice carrying an unexpectedly stern note that cut through the cabin's subdued murmur. "Could I see your boarding pass?" Though slightly surprised, Amelia maintained a calm demeanor, smiling politely. "Of course," she replied easily, reaching into her bag to retrieve her ticket. "Here you are." Veronica took the pass, but rather than a quick glance, she held onto it, studying the details longer than necessary. Her brow knitted slightly, betraying suspicion rather than mere protocol. Amelia watched this quietly, the first spark of unease flickering in her chest. She was accustomed to the quick checks and courteous exchanges of frequent travel. Something felt distinctly different here. Finally, Veronica raised an eyebrow and spoke again, her voice now edged with skepticism. "Are you certain this is your seat? You do realize this is first class?" Amelia's eyes narrowed just slightly at the subtle insinuation behind the words. Her response was calm but firm, clearly conveying her quiet authority. "Yes, I'm quite sure. I booked this ticket weeks ago, and it's fully confirmed." Veronica hesitated, clearly unsatisfied. The seconds ticked by, charged with an awkward tension that seemed to ripple outward, drawing curious glances from nearby passengers who had begun to notice the unfolding exchange. Amelia felt her discomfort grow. Veronica wasn't merely doing her job, she was openly questioning Amelia's right to be there, seemingly based solely on appearance and age. After an uncomfortable pause, Veronica cleared her throat. "I'm going to double-check with the front desk," she said curtly, forcing a thin smile. "Please remain seated." "Of course," Amelia replied quietly, her voice calm but her expression steely. She watched as Veronica walked briskly away, disappearing behind the curtain separating first class from the galley. In the sudden silence, Amelia couldn't shake the sense that Veronica's reaction went beyond normal protocol. It felt strangely personal. Several minutes passed slowly before Veronica reappeared, this time with a noticeably different expression. The authoritative facade had slipped slightly, replaced by a tentative discomfort Amelia recognized well. She had seen it many times when employees realized they'd made a serious mistake. "I'm terribly sorry, miss," Veronica began cautiously, her voice tinged with tension. "There seems to be a small issue with your reservation. I'll need you to step aside briefly while we sort this out." Amelia's stomach tightened, alarm bells ringing clearly in her mind. Her instincts told her this wasn't just a minor administrative error. Something else lay beneath the surface of Veronica's request. "What kind of issue?" Amelia asked calmly, meeting Veronica's gaze directly. Veronica shifted slightly, clearly unsettled by Amelia's unwavering composure. "I'll need to verify some details with our system," she replied shortly. "Please follow me to the galley." Amelia hesitated only briefly before rising gracefully from her seat. sensing the eyes of surrounding passengers follow her with curiosity and concern. A low murmur spread through the cabin as she followed Veronica's brisk footsteps down the aisle, each step increasing the tension Amelia felt building around them. When they reached the galley, Amelia noticed another younger flight attendant glance in their direction nervously before quickly looking away. Veronica motioned stiffly toward the small counter. "Wait here, please," she said abruptly, reaching for the phone mounted on the wall. Amelia stood calmly, arms crossed, outwardly composed while her mind raced through possibilities. She overheard snippets of Veronica's conversation, urgent words spoken in low tones, something about needing confirmation and a questionable ticket. Each passing second made the situation feel more deliberate, more targeted. Her gaze wandered briefly through the narrow galley window, seeking solace in the vast, serene sky beyond. Yet the peaceful scenery offered little comfort against the tension that Veronica's attitude had created. Why was this woman so insistent? Amelia's reservations were impeccable, her credentials spotless. There was simply no logical reason for the hostility. Veronica hung up the phone, her face flushed slightly with a mixture of frustration and apprehension. Turning back, she delivered her words abruptly, her voice sharper than before. "I'm sorry, Miss Brooks." Amelia froze inwardly. Veronica had addressed her by last name, something Amelia had never revealed. The realization was instant and clear. Veronica now knew exactly who Amelia was. Amelia Brooks, the airline's young, influential owner. The shift in Veronica's demeanor confirmed it immediately. The confident authority she previously displayed now crumbled visibly before Amelia's quiet strength. Yet, Amelia wasn't going to let this slide easily. She took a step closer, speaking in a quiet yet commanding tone. "You said Brooks. Interesting. Now you know who I am. But tell me, Veronica, why did you doubt my reservation initially? Was it my age, my clothes, or something else?" Veronica opened her mouth to speak but faltered, clearly caught off guard. Amelia continued evenly, eyes unwavering. "This isn't just about my seat anymore. It's about the assumptions that led you to question me. You assumed I didn't belong in first class, didn't you?" Veronica looked away briefly, a flush creeping into her cheeks. I apologize, Miss Brooks," she stammered, her voice losing its earlier sharpness. "It wasn't my intention." Amelia held up a gentle but firm hand, cutting her off. "Intentions aside, the impact remains. Every passenger on this plane watched you question my right to be here. Your assumptions have consequences, Veronica." As the exchange continued, another voice unexpectedly broke in. Clear, authoritative, coming from behind Amelia. Turning slightly, Amelia saw a well-known passenger rising from her seat. Victoria Lane, an acclaimed actress and social activist, whose quiet presence until now had gone unnoticed. "I've been listening, and I must agree with Ms. Brooks." Victoria spoke clearly, her voice resonating throughout the cabin. "This wasn't an innocent mistake. It's discrimination, pure and simple, and unacceptable in any form, especially in an airline claiming to value diversity." Passengers nearby began murmuring agreement, some even recording the interaction. The atmosphere in the plane shifted noticeably, tension rising to new heights. Veronica's face paled further, her confident persona unraveling rapidly. In the heat of this heightened moment, the captain's calm voice came over the intercom, requesting passengers remain seated as adjustments were made. Amelia knew this announcement was no coincidence. The airline was already reacting internally, trying to contain the damage before it spiraled out of control. Veronica, visibly shaken, turned away to place another urgent call, likely to a superior. Amelia stood steady, understanding clearly that this wasn't merely about her anymore. This had become something larger, something symbolic. It was a test not just of Veronica's professionalism, but of the airline's entire culture. A culture Amelia herself was responsible for shaping and protecting. She knew that this confrontation was only the beginning. After this flight landed, serious conversations would be held, policy changes would be initiated, and the very fabric of the airline's culture would be examined and reshaped. Amelia felt a quiet but resolute strength growing inside her. This incident would serve as the catalyst for meaningful, lasting change. She wasn't just a passenger who had been wrongly judged. She was Amelia Brooks, someone uniquely positioned to turn this troubling moment into a powerful movement for fairness, dignity, and genuine inclusion. Amelia couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that she was being unfairly singled out. The question nagging her now was just how far Veronica Mills intended to take this. As she followed Veronica down the narrow aisle, the quiet hum of the plane's engines seemed louder, more oppressive. Veronica's brisk footsteps resonated sharply, whereas Amelia moved deliberately, her pace steady yet cautious. With every step, the tension thickened, settling heavy in her chest. Reaching the galley, Veronica motioned curtly towards the service counter. "Please wait here," she instructed tersely, not meeting Amelia's eyes before quickly picking up the phone on the wall. Amelia crossed her arms, maintaining her outward calm, though beneath the surface her patience was rapidly wearing thin. She overheard fragments of Veronica's conversation, her voice lowered but clearly edged with irritation. "Yes, I have a situation here," Veronica muttered sharply. "I need urgent confirmation about a reservation. There's a passenger in first class, and I'm not convinced her ticket is valid." Amelia's brow furrowed immediately at the implication. Her reservation was impeccable. She'd personally insured every detail weeks ago. Not valid? The phrase echoed unsettlingly in her thoughts. Veronica's voice, carrying a hint of accusation, made the situation feel increasingly personal. Amelia felt a flush of indignation creep up her neck. The conversation seemed to drag on longer than necessary. Veronica occasionally shot quick glances toward Amelia, but never fully met her gaze. Amelia could sense the flight attendant's growing discomfort, masked behind a failing veneer of professionalism. Nearby, another younger flight attendant watched quietly from the corner, her expression sympathetic yet hesitant. Amelia briefly considered appealing to her for help, but decided against it. After all, this was Veronica's issue, and she needed to confront it directly. Finally, Veronica ended the call and turned back toward Amelia, her face visibly flushed, her previously confident posture now stiff and defensive. The forced, polite smile she'd worn earlier was long gone. "I'm sorry for the delay," Veronica began, her voice cold, clinical, and noticeably strained. "It seems there's been an issue with your reservation. It doesn't match our records for first class. I'll need you to move to the main cabin for now, along with your belongings." The words felt like a slap. Amelia stood frozen for a moment, processing the sheer audacity of the request. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, dangerously calm. "Excuse me? You're asking me to leave my first-class seat. Why, exactly?" Amelia made no attempt to hide her mounting frustration. She had endured enough of this passive-aggressive treatment, and she wasn't about to quietly comply with such an obvious slight. Veronica glanced around nervously, clearly aware of the attention they'd drawn from other crew members. "It's protocol," she muttered, barely audible, avoiding Amelia's piercing gaze. "I have to confirm everything. Please cooperate so we can sort this out quickly." But Amelia didn't budge. Instead, she stood taller, eyes blazing with quiet determination. Her voice was steady, firm, carrying a weight of quiet authority that made Veronica visibly uncomfortable. "I've traveled on this airline countless times. My reservation is perfectly valid and I'm exactly where I should be. So tell me, Veronica, what's your real issue here?" Veronica hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Amelia's composed yet pointed challenge. Other flight attendants were openly watching now, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. From behind the privacy curtain, murmurs from passengers in first class drifted into the galley, adding another layer of tension. The situation had clearly escalated beyond a mere seating discrepancy. It had become deeply personal, and the entire cabin sensed it. Amelia's pulse quickened, yet she maintained her calm facade, unwilling to give Veronica the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. She had dealt with situations like this before, being underestimated, doubted, or judged unfairly. But this confrontation struck deeper, a stark reminder of prejudices she knew still lingered in the culture she had dedicated her career to changing. Before Veronica could respond, the captain's voice cut through the tense atmosphere, coming clear yet controlled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we kindly ask you to remain seated as we finalize a few adjustments. Thank you for your understanding." The announcement, far from easing the situation, only served to heighten the sense of urgency in the galley. Veronica paled visibly, turning away sharply and muttering something under her breath. Amelia watched her closely, her resolve strengthening by the second. Whatever was unfolding now went beyond simple misunderstandings. It felt targeted, intentional, almost vindictive. Veronica disappeared briefly behind the curtain again, her hurried footsteps indicating panic. Amelia stood rooted in place, staring out the small galley window, attempting to regain her composure amidst the soft hum of the engines, which now felt more claustrophobic than calming. She wasn't just dealing with the inconvenience of a disrupted flight, she was confronting something deeper, more troubling. Moments later, Veronica returned, her face pale and unsettled. Her confident exterior had crumbled further, revealing an unmistakable unease. Amelia's suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't simply about airline protocol or an innocent reservation mix-up. It was personal. Amelia could sense that Veronica's behavior stemmed from assumptions that had no place in their airline or any professional environment. Determined not to back down, Amelia met Veronica's uncertain gaze with an unwavering stare, silently demanding honesty and respect. The silence stretched uncomfortably, filled only by the distant whispers of curious passengers and the low drone of the airplane's engines. Finally, Amelia spoke again, her voice measured but tinged with undeniable authority. "Listen carefully, Veronica. I don't know what assumptions led you to question my right to be in first class, but I assure you this isn't something I'll simply overlook. This airline stands for inclusivity and respect, and right now your actions directly contradict those values." Veronica's eyes widened slightly, realization dawning slowly on her features. For the first time since their interaction began, Veronica truly saw the depth of Amelia's quiet strength, and perhaps, just perhaps, realized the enormous mistake she had made. As Amelia stood firm, the murmurs from passengers grew louder. The atmosphere had shifted irreversibly. There was no returning quietly to her seat as if nothing had happened. Instead, Amelia knew this incident would ripple far beyond this galley. It was no longer about simply proving the validity of her ticket. It was about challenging the harmful biases that lingered, even within her own airline. Amelia was ready to face whatever consequences followed, determined that today's incident would not be brushed aside. This was her airline, and she would ensure it became an example, not only in words, but through decisive, meaningful action. Amelia stood quietly in the galley, arms folded tightly across her chest, her pulse quickening with every passing second. She couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that Veronica's actions were driven by something deeper, more personal than a simple reservation error. Around her, the low hum of the airplane's engines felt louder, a constant reminder of the tense, confined space she was now trapped within. Time seemed to stretch painfully as she waited. The soft, indistinct chatter of first-class passengers trickled through the galley walls, blending into a gentle murmur, but Amelia's mind was anything but calm. What could possibly be taking Veronica so long? Was this some sort of deliberate test? Amelia had always prided herself on her modesty, never seeking attention or making unnecessary demands. She hadn't wanted special treatment, only a peaceful flight home. So why was she suddenly under this strange scrutiny? Finally, Veronica re-emerged from behind the curtain, her demeanor notably altered. Her confident exterior had cracked, replaced by visible nervousness. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and her eyes darted about anxiously. Amelia noticed this change immediately and for a brief moment felt a flicker of hope that Veronica had realized her mistake. But the hope faded quickly as Veronica spoke again, her voice tinged with discomfort yet still attempting to convey authority. "I'm afraid I must ask you to move, Ms. Brooks," she said tightly, clearly forcing the words out. "There's an issue flagged in our reservation system. We'll need you to relocate to the main cabin temporarily while we clarify the situation. I apologize, but this is protocol." Amelia felt a sharp sting of disbelief, her jaw tightening involuntarily. This wasn't merely an inconvenience, this was blatant disrespect. Everything about Veronica's tone and demeanor suggested something deeper was at play. "Are you serious?" Amelia's voice was calm but carried an icy sharpness. "I've traveled extensively with this airline. My reservation is perfectly valid and this is my seat. If there were an issue, which there isn't, you should have handled it privately, professionally, not humiliated me in front of everyone. What exactly is your issue here, Veronica?" Veronica visibly recoiled at Amelia's direct challenge, momentarily speechless. For the first time since the incident began, Amelia saw uncertainty flash through Veronica's eyes. The flight attendant seemed unprepared for Amelia's firm response, and her mouth opened as if to speak, only to close again wordlessly, shoulders stiffening. Before Veronica could regain composure and respond, a calm yet authoritative voice interrupted from just behind Amelia. "Excuse me," came the voice of an older male passenger who had quietly been observing from his nearby seat in first class. Amelia turned slightly to see him, a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s, his expression stern but concerned. He had clearly been listening carefully to the entire exchange. "What's going on here, exactly?" he continued, directing his question pointedly at Veronica. "This young woman clearly has a valid first-class ticket. Why is she being treated this way?" Amelia felt a surge of gratitude at his unexpected intervention. His question hung heavily in the air, demanding an explanation. Veronica shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny, her hands twitching slightly, her gaze dropping to the floor. I'm sorry," Veronica stammered, glancing briefly at Amelia before quickly averting her eyes again. "I'm just following protocol. There's an issue with her ticket. I'm required to verify everything. I'm just doing my job." "Her ticket is perfectly valid," the older man interrupted firmly, his voice rising with a gentle yet unmistakable authority. "I've traveled on this airline countless times, and I've never witnessed a first-class passenger treated with such disrespect. What's really going on here?" Veronica opened her mouth again, but no words came out. Amelia watched, unblinking, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on the flight attendant. This confrontation had shifted from a private misunderstanding into a public spectacle, one that Veronica clearly wasn't equipped to handle. Around them, murmurs from other passengers grew louder, their whispers blending into an anxious hum. Everyone was watching now, shifting glances between Veronica and Amelia, awaiting a resolution. Amelia stood her ground, steady and resolute. She had tolerated enough. "Listen carefully, Veronica," Amelia said slowly, her tone even and controlled. "I don't know what your real issue is with me, but whatever assumptions you're making, whatever personal judgments you might hold, you need to deal with them in a way that doesn't humiliate passengers. I'm asking you for basic respect, nothing more." Veronica seemed frozen in place, visibly shaken by Amelia's unwavering calmness and authoritative presence. But before she could form another response, a small, insistent beep from the galley phone pierced the heavy silence. The sound seemed to jolt Veronica back into reality, a clear signal that time for excuses had run out. Amelia watched closely as Veronica's shoulders slumped slightly, the full gravity of the situation clearly dawning on her. For a moment, Amelia wondered if Veronica might finally offer an apology, but instead the flight attendant turned abruptly, her face pale, hurriedly picking up the phone and speaking urgently into it, her voice tremulous and strained. Amelia stood rooted firmly in place, eyes steady and unflinching. Whatever would happen next, she knew this had moved far beyond a mere apology or explanation. The truth of the matter was about to surface fully, and she was more than ready for it. Veronica's voice trembled slightly as she spoke rapidly into the phone, her nervous glances periodically darting toward Amelia. Although the words were too hushed and hurried to decipher, Amelia sensed clearly that the conversation had become desperate, panicked, an acknowledgement that Veronica had seriously misjudged the situation. The older male passenger, still standing close by, met Amelia's eyes briefly, offering a subtle nod of support and solidarity. Amelia returned the gesture with quiet gratitude, strengthened by this unexpected ally. She could sense now that this incident wasn't simply a personal inconvenience. It represented something deeper. It was about challenging harmful assumptions and biases hidden beneath professional facades. Amelia wasn't merely standing up for herself, she was confronting a culture of subtle prejudice, something she vowed never to tolerate within the airline she had poured her heart and soul into building. The tension in the galley was palpable, hanging thickly in the air, unresolved and increasingly uncomfortable for everyone involved. Amelia knew with absolute certainty that the repercussions from this moment would extend far beyond the walls of this aircraft. This wasn't just a confrontation with a single flight attendant. It was a defining moment, a public stand against unfair treatment and unchecked prejudice. And Amelia Brooks, quietly formidable, was determined to see it through to the very end. The discomfort radiating from Veronica Mills had become impossible to ignore. Amelia Brooks could feel the tension rising sharply, spreading outward and enveloping the entire galley. She wasn't certain exactly what was happening behind the scenes, but her instincts told her this was no mere seating confusion. This felt distinctly personal. As each moment passed, Veronica's urgent, hushed conversation on the phone seemed only to intensify the pressure already building. Amelia stood steadfastly, her arms folded in quiet defiance. Around her, the galley had become a silent pressure cooker, the uneasy glances of the other flight attendants now openly directed toward the unfolding situation. The whispers from first-class passengers had grown louder, seeping through the thin partition that separated them. Yet, Amelia didn't waver. Her deliberate calm was more than just composure. It was a quiet rebellion against assumptions, prejudice. Finally, Veronica ended the call and turned slowly back toward Amelia. Her confident facade had cracked completely. Uncertainty now replaced authority in her expression. Amelia noticed this shift immediately and realized that for the first time since their interaction began, Veronica Mills was no longer in control. The power dynamics had unmistakably shifted in Amelia's favor, and she was determined not to relinquish it. Veronica cleared her throat nervously, her voice wavering slightly as she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said haltingly, unable to hide the apprehension in her tone. "It seems there's been a mistake. Your reservation, it's flagged in our system. I must ask you to temporarily move to the main cabin while we sort this out." Amelia felt a surge of indignation. Her pulse quickened, but outwardly she revealed nothing but steady resolve. This was no longer just an inconvenience. It was a direct affront, a clear insinuation that someone like her didn't belong. Veronica's words had exposed the underlying prejudice that Amelia had suspected from the beginning. Taking a deliberate step forward, Amelia's gaze locked onto Veronica's, unwavering and intense. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice carrying a chilling calmness that made Veronica visibly flinch. "I've traveled extensively with this airline. This airline and my reservation is valid. This seat is mine. Even if there were an issue, you could have handled this privately, with dignity and professionalism. You had no right to treat me this way." Veronica recoiled slightly, the color draining further from her face. Amelia saw uncertainty flicker in the flight attendant's eyes, an unmistakable realization dawning that she'd badly misjudged the situation. Veronica opened her mouth, trying desperately to regain composure and control, but before she could speak, another voice sharply interrupted them. "Excuse me," came the firm, authoritative tone from behind Amelia. She turned slightly to see the older gentleman who had earlier challenged Veronica, now stepping fully into the galley. His presence radiated calm confidence. "What's really happening here?" he asked pointedly, eyes fixed firmly on Veronica. "I've observed this entire exchange. Ms. Brooks has a confirmed ticket, perfectly legitimate. Why exactly is she being treated in this manner?" Amelia felt an immediate rush of gratitude toward this unexpected ally. His direct intervention had shifted the dynamic entirely, placing Veronica under greater scrutiny. Veronica, visibly shaken, struggled to respond. I apologize," Veronica stammered, glancing nervously from Amelia to the passenger. "I'm just following protocol. Her reservation was flagged. I was simply verifying." "Her reservation is perfectly valid," the older passenger interjected again, his voice rising with clear indignation. "I've flown this airline frequently, and I've never witnessed a passenger being treated so poorly. I think everyone here deserves to understand why." Veronica's mouth opened, but no words emerged. Her hands trembled slightly, the gravity of the moment clearly overwhelming her. Amelia watched closely, feeling no sympathy for the discomfort Veronica now experienced. After everything she'd endured, she deserved answers. "Listen carefully, Veronica," Amelia said quietly but forcefully, stepping forward again and forcing the flight attendant's gaze to meet hers. "I don't know exactly what assumptions you've made about me, or why, but whatever they were, you've allowed them to cloud your judgment and humiliate me publicly. I'm not asking, I'm demanding that you treat me with the respect you owe every passenger on this flight." Veronica visibly flinched, Amelia's calm firmness clearly unsettling her. Before Veronica could respond again, a small beep from the galley phone broke through the tense silence. The message was clear. Veronica had no time left for explanations or excuses. Amelia watched closely as the flight attendant's shoulders sagged under the increasing pressure. Amelia briefly hoped that Veronica might finally offer a genuine apology. But instead, Veronica, face now pale and stricken with apprehension, turned abruptly back to the phone, dialing quickly. This time, Amelia knew instinctively that Veronica wasn't merely calling the front desk again. She was reaching out to someone far higher up in the airline's chain of command. Amelia's pulse quickened further. The stakes had clearly escalated. The atmosphere in the galley shifted once more, the other flight attendants now openly watching with wide, anxious eyes. Amelia's mind raced. Who exactly was Veronica calling? Whoever it was, Amelia resolved that this issue would not be swept quietly under the rug. Minutes ticked by slowly, each second heavy with anticipation and tension. Amelia remained perfectly still, letting the silence deepen around her, determined to see this confrontation through. She knew the truth, whatever it was about to surface. She wasn't certain exactly what awaited, but Amelia Brooks would not allow herself to be intimidated. This was more than an issue about a seat. This was a moment for her to take a definitive stand. Finally, Veronica ended her second call, turning slowly back toward Amelia. There was a noticeable shift in the flight attendant's demeanor. The weight of the conversation she'd just had seemed visible in her deflated posture and pale expression. Veronica's eyes finally met Amelia's, uncertainty and anxiety now clearly etched on her face. "Ms. Brooks," Veronica began softly, her voice small, almost timid now, "I am terribly sorry for this inconvenience. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, a mistake on my part." Amelia froze inwardly at the sound of her surname. "Ms. Brooks?" She hadn't introduced herself by name to Veronica. The flight attendant's slip was telling. Amelia felt her pulse quicken sharply, as clarity struck her. Veronica now knew exactly who she was. Everything suddenly clicked into place. This wasn't a random mix-up or mere oversight. Veronica Mills had finally realized that the quiet, unassuming young woman she'd unfairly singled out was none other than Amelia Brooks, the owner and CEO of the very airline she represented. Suddenly, the entire atmosphere in the galley shifted dramatically. Amelia felt it immediately. The apologetic note in Veronica's voice now sounded forced, rushed, a desperate attempt at damage control. Veronica's inadvertent slip of Amelia's surname, Ms. Brooks, hung thick in the air, and the weight of that recognition slowly settled into the flight attendant's expression. Veronica's face turned an even deeper shade of pale, her eyes wide with the dawning realization of her catastrophic mistake. I didn't realize," Veronica stammered, all traces of her earlier confidence stripped away. "I had no idea who you were. Ms. Brooks, I'm so sorry. I assumed," Amelia echoed softly, stepping forward. Her voice remained calm, but beneath that calm lay a sharp edge of quiet authority that made Veronica visibly flinch. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it, Veronica? You assumed based on what? My age? My appearance? Tell me, what exactly makes a passenger qualified to sit in first class?" Veronica's gaze fell to the floor, unable to meet Amelia's penetrating stare. She had no response. Amelia could see the embarrassment in Veronica's posture, shoulders sagging under the heavy weight of her own exposed biases, yet Amelia felt no sympathy. This was more than just embarrassment, it was a lesson that needed to be deeply understood. Veronica had made a judgment, publicly humiliating Amelia in front of an entire cabin, and now she was caught in her own web of assumption. I didn't mean to offend you," Veronica finally murmured, her voice shaking. "I was just trying to do my job. I thought there might have been an issue with your ticket, and when I saw you, She trailed off abruptly, realizing how absurd her justification sounded. "I shouldn't have assumed anything," she admitted quietly, her tone defeated. Amelia stood tall, her gaze never wavering. "No, you shouldn't have," she replied firmly, each word deliberate and clear. "You should have treated me with the respect due to every passenger, young, old, rich, or otherwise. But you didn't. And now here we are." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the soft drone of the plane's engines. Around them, the other flight attendants avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable. The older gentleman who had earlier supported Amelia observed quietly, nodding subtly as if acknowledging the deeper meaning behind her words. He understood this was no longer about one person's isolated mistake. It represented a broader issue, a fundamental cultural flaw that everyone could learn from. Veronica fumbled again, attempting to backpedal. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Brooks," she repeated, her voice now barely above a whisper. "This will never happen again. Let me get the captain." "No." Amelia cut her off sharply. "You're not going anywhere, Veronica. Not until we resolve this right here and right now. You've made assumptions about me, and now you're going to address them directly." Veronica's eyes widened, filled with a mixture of anxiety and guilt. "Address them?" she echoed weakly. "Yes," Amelia continued, her voice unwavering. "Not just with me, but with every passenger on this flight who witnessed your actions. You've humiliated me publicly, and I don't take that lightly." Veronica's shoulders sagged further as she nodded, clearly defeated. I understand. I'll fetch the captain immediately." As Veronica turned to leave, Amelia watched her closely, mind racing with the implications of the encounter. Never had she imagined that a routine flight would escalate into a confrontation about prejudice and dignity. But now, Veronica knew precisely who she had disrespected: Amelia Brooks, owner of the airline itself. There would be no hiding from the consequences. After a few tense moments, Veronica returned with the captain, a tall, dignified man whose expression hardened the moment he assessed the situation. "Miss Brooks," he said, his voice steady but respectful, "please accept my sincerest apologies for this misunderstanding. Veronica has clearly made a serious error in judgment." Amelia nodded slowly, her composure unshaken. "Captain, this isn't just about a misunderstanding. It's about respect. Veronica made assumptions about me, assumptions I refuse to overlook." The captain shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between Veronica and Amelia. "We will address this matter internally," he assured her. "Veronica will undergo retraining, and we will review our policies thoroughly to ensure this never happens again." Amelia's gaze narrowed slightly, her voice now edged with quiet determination. "Training is a start, but it's not enough. This needs to be about more than correcting one incident. It's about changing the entire culture. Passengers, regardless of class or appearance, must never again feel judged or disrespected. Real change begins now." The captain met her gaze, his expression solemn. "I understand completely. I will personally oversee the necessary steps and report directly back to you." Amelia stood in thoughtful silence, absorbing his words. This conversation marked only the beginning of a much larger commitment, yet it was enough for the moment. She didn't need apologies. She required meaningful, measurable change. With a firm nod, she concluded the conversation and began her measured walk back to her seat. As she re-entered the first-class cabin, murmurs of approval greeted her. Passengers exchanged respectful nods, their expressions reflecting a clear understanding of the gravity of the situation. Amelia could feel their quiet support, affirming she had not simply been a passive victim, but a powerful advocate for fairness and dignity. Sitting down again, Amelia looked out at the calm sky, allowing herself a deep breath. She wasn't one to seek confrontation, but today had been different. Today had called for her to make a stand, not only for herself, but for every passenger who had ever faced unfair assumptions and disrespect. The older gentleman who had spoken up earlier offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement as Amelia settled into her seat, a silent salute to the strength she had shown. She returned it with a slight, appreciative smile. She wasn't seeking applause, but the quiet solidarity from those around her meant more than she'd anticipated. This was not merely her battle. It was about respect, equality, and dismantling deeply rooted biases. Throughout the remainder of the flight, Amelia noticed a clear shift in the atmosphere. Veronica moved through the cabin hesitantly, avoiding Amelia's gaze whenever their paths crossed. The captain, returning briefly from the cockpit, gave Amelia a look of quiet assurance, signaling he would follow through on his promise. Determined and composed, Amelia pulled out her phone, quickly typing a detailed message to her assistant. She requested an immediate, comprehensive review of all customer-facing staff training programs, underscoring the critical importance of addressing unconscious bias. This incident was not to be forgotten. It had to lead to lasting reform. Messages soon arrived from colleagues and friends, all responding to the growing conversation sparked by the incident. News spread rapidly, and Amelia sensed a profound ripple effect beginning to take shape, but she was ready for the storm ahead. This wasn't merely about correcting one isolated incident. It was about challenging a culture of bias that she herself, as the airline's owner, had perhaps underestimated. As the plane began its descent, Amelia's thoughts sharpened into resolve. She knew exactly what needed to be done. It was no longer about mere apologies. It was about accountability and lasting change. Amelia Brooks had built this airline on values she deeply believed in, and she would ensure it stayed true to those values. The plane touched down smoothly, but Amelia knew her journey was far from over. She caught sight of Veronica at the front of the cabin, visibly shaken as she spoke urgently to other flight attendants. Amelia gathered her belongings, fully aware that this incident would soon become far larger than one uncomfortable flight. It would redefine the entire airline's approach to respect, and dignity. As she stepped off the plane into the bustling terminal, Amelia Brooks was no longer merely a passenger. She was now a woman firmly committed to reshaping the industry she loved, determined that no one would ever again face the humiliation she had endured today. This was more than personal. It was the beginning of a powerful movement for systemic change. As Amelia moved through the bustling terminal, she felt the subtle gaze of fellow passengers following her, a silent wave of acknowledgement and admiration accompanying each glance. It was clear to Amelia that everyone around her had witnessed the confrontation, recognizing now that it had become far more significant than one passenger's discomfort. She wasn't merely a traveler anymore. She had become a symbol, embodying the urgent need for accountability and the fight against unchecked discrimination within a system that too often allowed it. Passengers who had remained silent during the tense confrontation aboard the plane now openly expressed their support through their quiet nods and whispered words of solidarity. Amelia's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from colleagues, employees, and even strangers. Many were passengers who'd personally observed the incident. Several had already reached out directly to the airline, demanding clear, immediate accountability. It was increasingly apparent to Amelia that people were tired of being treated unfairly based on age, appearance, or superficial assumptions. Now, with a united voice, they stood firmly behind her. As Amelia retrieved her luggage and walked deliberately toward the airport exit, her mind began formulating her next strategic steps. Of course, her legal team would become involved. Yet she knew she needed to personally keep the momentum going. A mere apology from the airline would not suffice. She intended to push for a comprehensive review, not just of employee training, but of the airline's entire culture, from customer service practices to internal accountability measures. Sliding into her car, Amelia exhaled deeply as the door clicked shut, releasing a breath she hadn't even realized she'd been holding. She stared thoughtfully out the window, watching the city's lights blur past her. Her mind was racing, energized yet heavy with responsibility. Today marked only the beginning of a long and challenging journey. Systemic change, she knew, required time, relentless effort, and unwavering determination, and Amelia Brooks was more than ready to lead the charge. The drive home felt far longer than usual. The gentle hum of the car's engine barely registered against the whirlwind of Amelia's thoughts. Even though she had successfully asserted herself, an unsettling tension lingered. It was clear that the battle she faced wasn't over. The incident wouldn't fade away quietly. It would shadow every future meeting, every internal discussion, every decision at the company she had painstakingly built. This was not an isolated event. It had revealed a deeper, systemic issue that required immediate and lasting reform. Her phone buzzed once more, drawing Amelia back from her contemplation. She glanced down at the screen, seeing a message from her assistant. The legal team had already been informed, and the Human Resources Department had launched an immediate review of all employee training programs, emphasizing sensitivity and unconscious bias education. The airline appeared to be acting swiftly, but Amelia knew swift action alone wasn't enough. She wanted transparency. She demanded measurable, lasting results. For her, this wasn't about managing appearances. It was about fundamentally transforming the company's core values and practices. As her car slowed to a stop in front of her home, Amelia's phone buzzed again, this time alerting her to social media notifications. The incident aboard the flight had already begun to trend online. Passengers who had witnessed the confrontation firsthand were openly sharing their accounts, many voicing strong disapproval of Veronica Mills's actions, and others beginning to openly question the airline's broader culture. Amelia wasn't entirely surprised by the attention. She'd anticipated the story might resonate, but what caught her off guard was the sheer volume of support swiftly gathering around her. Strangers rallied for accountability, publicly demanding tangible actions from the airline. A wave of relief and resolve surged through Amelia. This wasn't merely about her personal dignity anymore. It had evolved into a movement, one that people were clearly ready to champion. She sensed the conversation had sparked a broader, much-needed dialogue, and Amelia knew deep down she now carried the responsibility to nurture it into genuine reform. Entering her home, Amelia tossed her keys onto the entryway table and stepped quietly into the living room. Gabriella Reed, her partner, sat calmly on the couch, scrolling intently through her phone. When Amelia walked in, Gabriella quickly looked up, eyes filled with quiet concern and curiosity. "How was the flight?" Gabriella asked gently, her voice cautious yet supportive. Amelia could tell Gabriella had already been tracking the developing situation online, sensing the storm brewing even from afar. Amelia sank slowly into the chair next to Gabriella, leaning back heavily with a tired sigh. She allowed herself a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. "It was more complicated than expected," Amelia admitted, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of what had transpired. "But I think it needed to happen. This isn't just about me or this one flight. It's about something much bigger." Gabriella nodded quietly, setting her phone down. Her gaze softened, full of quiet understanding and reassurance. "I saw what's happening online. People are really speaking up," she said gently. "You've struck a chord." Amelia felt a sense of calm begin to settle over her. Gabriella's quiet strength had always been a comfort to her, especially in challenging moments like these. "It's not going to be easy," Amelia continued thoughtfully. "This isn't something we can solve overnight. It's about changing an entire system, shifting mindsets. But someone has to do it." Gabriella reached over, taking Amelia's hand gently in hers. "And that someone is you," she said with gentle conviction. "But you're not alone in this. People have your back. I've got your back." Amelia squeezed Gabriella's hand gratefully, her resolve deepening. She knew Gabriella was right. She wasn't facing this alone. A quiet determination settled into her heart as she leaned back, allowing herself a moment to rest. The battle for meaningful change was just beginning, and Amelia Brooks knew that the road ahead would demand everything she had: strength, patience, courage. But she was ready. Change was coming, and Amelia was determined not just to create it, but to ensure it endured. Amelia leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly as if releasing the weight of the entire day. "I didn't expect it to escalate like this," she admitted quietly, her voice steady but laced with fatigue. "But now that it has, we have to ensure it doesn't just disappear quietly into the background. This needs to spark something bigger, Gabriella. Something lasting." Gabriella Reed nodded gently, her calm gaze reflecting a deep and quiet understanding. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Amelia replied firmly, her eyes narrowing slightly with determination. "I can't. It's not just about me. It's about every person who's ever faced unfair judgment or bias. It's about every passenger who sat silently, wondering why they were singled out, wondering why they didn't belong." She paused briefly, her voice dropping to a quiet, resolute tone. "It's time to make sure something actually changes. We can't allow this to get buried." The following days passed in a relentless blur of activity. Amelia found no moment of rest as her schedule quickly filled with back-to-back meetings, endless calls, and continuous email exchanges with her legal team, human resources, and the airline's board of directors. The incident aboard her flight had ignited something far beyond an internal issue. Media outlets had quickly caught wind of the story, and the public demanded immediate accountability. Headlines began flooding newspapers and online channels, all highlighting the need for change within the airline and questioning its corporate culture. There was no turning back now. Amelia sensed clearly that this was a pivotal moment to create lasting impact. Yet, beneath her relentless drive lay a subtle but growing sense of exhaustion, a new burden of responsibility. Amelia had always preferred working quietly behind the scenes, tirelessly building her airline's reputation and culture from the ground up. Now, suddenly thrust into the spotlight, she found the attention unfamiliar and somewhat overwhelming. But this wasn't personal anymore. It was about something far more profound. It was about fundamentally shifting the way her company viewed and respected its passengers, ensuring dignity and fairness for everyone. Sitting alone in her office one evening, Amelia reviewed the initial responses from the board. A notification flashed on her screen. One of her senior executives had begun drafting a public statement acknowledging the incident, expressing regret, and promising change. But Amelia knew that mere words were not enough. She quickly began editing the statement herself, adding language that pushed for transparency and detailed, measurable actions. It wasn't sufficient to simply say they were sorry. They needed concrete steps outlining precisely how the airline would prevent this kind of discrimination in the future. Her directives were clear: mandatory sensitivity training for every employee, a comprehensive review of the airline's hiring and training practices, and an external audit into customer interactions and internal culture. Amelia knew these proposals wouldn't be universally popular. Some employees would resist, others would question her motives. Yet she remained resolute. This was no longer about damage control. It was about creating an entirely new standard of accountability and respect within the airline industry itself. Gabriella provided unwavering support throughout the turbulent days. Each evening they sat together long into the night, thoughtfully discussing the company's future and strategizing how best to navigate the storm that now engulfed them. The conversations were never easy. Both understanding the magnitude of what they were facing, this wasn't simply a battle against one employee's prejudiced assumptions. It was about confronting and dismantling the deep-rooted cultural biases that allowed such incidents to occur in the first place. One night, Gabriella broke the silence, her voice quiet yet deeply reflective. "Do you really think they'll commit to it? Will the company genuinely change?" Amelia paused, gazing thoughtfully at the pile of documents on her desk before answering honestly, "I don't know for certain." Her eyes hardened with renewed determination as she added, "But I won't give them any other option. If they try to sidestep this or just offer empty promises, I'll hold them accountable. I'll make sure of it." Gabriella offered a reassuring smile, her expression full of quiet faith in Amelia's steadfast resolve. "I know you will." The very next morning, Amelia was already hard at work drafting her next urgent communication to the board, emphasizing the necessity of bringing in independent third-party consultants to oversee the proposed changes. She would not relent. This was just the beginning of a much larger mission. In the days that followed, time seemed to blur as Amelia threw herself into her new role as a visible advocate for systemic change. Every waking moment was consumed by phone calls, strategic meetings, and intensive discussions on how best to move forward. She allowed herself no respite. There was simply too much at stake. Media coverage around the airline continued to intensify, and Amelia's name appeared repeatedly, now synonymous not just with being unfairly treated, but as a powerful figure demanding accountability and change. Yet despite the intense pressure, Amelia remained focused and meticulous. She reviewed every document, scrutinized each proposal, and absorbed all the feedback her legal and HR teams provided. There was no space for missteps or hesitation. The airline needed to act swiftly, decisively, and transparently. Even as the spotlight grew hotter, Amelia pushed forward. Internally, the company responded quickly. Mandatory training programs were rolled out urgently, policies began to shift, and hiring practices came under immediate review. But Amelia knew that speed alone wasn't enough. She insisted on genuine, sustainable transformation, a deep cultural reset that prioritized dignity and respect above everything else. Amelia felt the true weight of responsibility grow heavier with each passing day, but she embraced it fully, knowing she stood at the center of a powerful movement. Her determination never wavered, supported always by Gabriella's quiet strength and encouragement. Each night, after another exhausting round of meetings and interviews, Gabriella waited patiently at home, ready to discuss developments, strategize next steps, and reaffirm Amelia's mission. They both knew this journey would be difficult, yet both also knew its importance far exceeded any one incident. For Amelia Brooks, this had become more than a personal quest. It was now a commitment to everyone who had ever faced unfair judgment. It was about creating a new reality, one in which no passenger would ever again feel unwelcome or disrespected. And Amelia would not rest until real, measurable change was achieved. Amelia poured every ounce of energy into coordinating with her legal, HR, and PR teams. Public opinion was critical now. She understood that even a minor misstep could jeopardize not just her airline's reputation, but the trust they'd spent years building. The company's response had to be swift, decisive, and meticulous. Amelia insisted the statement from the airline must go beyond mere apologies. It needed to outline a concrete, actionable path toward meaningful change. When the statement finally went public late one afternoon, the reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. Headlines surged across news platforms, while social media erupted with a mix of enthusiastic approval and deep skepticism. Some praised the airline's commitment to reform, while others openly questioned whether such promises would lead to genuine change. Amelia knew this statement was just the beginning. The real work still lay ahead. She had ensured the statement included clear, explicit commitments, mandatory sensitivity training for all employees, a thorough review of hiring and customer service protocols, and an immediate introduction of a third-party audit to hold the company accountable. The statement also explicitly confirmed the suspension and internal review of Veronica Mills, the flight attendant involved in the incident. Yet Amelia was keenly aware that mere announcements would not suffice. Her mind raced, determined to convert these promises into tangible results. Optics alone wouldn't satisfy her. She demanded measurable, sustained progress. Gabriella stood steadfastly at Amelia's side, quietly supportive yet understanding the complexities at play. "It's a good first step," Gabriella offered after reviewing the public statement, her eyes thoughtful. "But you're right, this is just the beginning." Amelia nodded firmly. "Exactly. Words alone won't solve this. We need to ensure this goes beyond public relations. The company culture itself needs a fundamental shift, and I'm going to see that it happens." In the days that followed, public and media attention only intensified. Rather than fading, the controversy gained momentum, placing immense pressure on the airline. Online, the hashtag Airline Accountability trended continuously, customers and industry experts alike demanding that airlines truly reform the way they treated passengers. Amelia felt this pressure deeply. It was no longer merely about addressing one incident. It was about changing industry-wide attitudes toward passengers and eradicating ingrained biases. Internally, her teams were working tirelessly to meet her ambitious goals. HR had begun overhauling training programs, emphasizing unconscious bias education, sensitivity, and genuine customer respect, but Amelia refused to delegate completely. She personally attended every major meeting and actively participated in strategy sessions. She ensured that everyone understood the stakes involved. This was her airline, her vision, and she wouldn't rest until integrity and respect were at its core. Initially hesitant, the airline's board of directors gradually shifted toward supporting Amelia's vision. She had pushed hard, emphasizing the urgency and moral responsibility the company now faced. Gradually, the board began to grasp the full gravity of the situation and became actively involved in planning comprehensive reforms. Amelia knew these first steps were promising, but that this process would be long and challenging. She expected resistance from some quarters, but was prepared to push through any obstacle. In one pivotal executive meeting, Amelia felt the atmosphere shift tangibly. The tension was high, but it was a productive tension, filled with the beginnings of real understanding. After a pause, one senior board member broke the silence. "We need to go beyond simple compliance. This can't just be about avoiding future incidents. It has to be about creating an entirely new culture based on respect and genuine equality." Amelia looked around the table slowly, meeting each executive's eyes deliberately. "Exactly," she affirmed clearly. "This isn't about simply patching over mistakes. It's about prevention, making sure this never happens again. We're going to set a new standard, and we're going to be transparent about every step we take." That evening, Amelia sat in her office, reflecting quietly on their progress when her phone buzzed urgently. It was a message from her legal team confirming that the third-party audit she had insisted upon would begin within days. Amelia exhaled deeply. This was the breakthrough she had waited for. The audit would scrutinize every aspect of the airline's policies, practices, and culture, exposing whatever flaws or biases had allowed the troubling incident to occur unchecked. Amelia immediately decided to contact the auditing firm personally. She would not leave this critical step to chance. Having dedicated years of her life to building the airline's reputation, she wasn't about to see it crumble due to one unaddressed failure. This audit needed to be exhaustive, transparent, and publicly accessible, ensuring passengers understood the sincerity of her commitment to meaningful change. As Amelia jotted down notes for her upcoming meetings, her mind drifted back to the passengers on her flight, the individuals who had watched silently, some whispering, others quietly supportive. Amelia hadn't forgotten their subtle looks of encouragement, their quiet solidarity that day, and now those very passengers had joined the growing chorus demanding accountability and transparency from the airline. Their voices had amplified the movement, ensuring the airline could not quietly evade responsibility. The realization hit Amelia profoundly. This wasn't just her fight anymore. She was no longer merely addressing an internal company issue. Now the entire industry was watching, waiting, and expecting change. Amelia felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders, yet it energized her rather than drained her. She knew that by confronting this head-on, she could inspire lasting transformation, not just in her airline but across the entire industry. The following weeks passed in an intense blur of emails, phone calls, and late-night strategic planning. Every day presented new challenges, yet Amelia never wavered. The mounting pressure only seemed to strengthen her resolve. This wasn't just another corporate apology. It was an opportunity for Amelia to leave a lasting legacy, reshaping the airline industry into something fundamentally fairer and more inclusive. As the third-party audit finally commenced, Amelia braced herself for uncomfortable truths. She knew the audit would uncover significant flaws in the company's existing culture, exposing biases and oversights that had remained hidden for far too long. Yet she also understood how essential this transparency was. These changes weren't mere public relations. They were crucial steps toward creating a truly equitable and respectful environment for all passengers. Simultaneously, the airline's customer service teams underwent comprehensive, reinforced training sessions. Amelia personally attended several sessions, ensuring the employees understood not just the principles of respect and inclusion, but internalized their importance in everyday interactions. She reinforced a clear, non-negotiable expectation. Every passenger, from first-class luxury travelers to economy passengers, deserved dignity and value. One afternoon, while reviewing a critical set of documents, Amelia's phone buzzed again. It was a call from the airline's PR team. The audit's initial results were in. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Amelia prepared herself. She knew these findings would be difficult to confront, but necessary. She was ready to face whatever revelations awaited, determined to ensure that this incident would forever reshape how the airline, and perhaps the entire industry, treated passengers. For Amelia Brooks, there was no turning back. The journey she'd begun in that airline galley, when confronted with Veronica Mills's biases, had expanded into something far greater. She was no longer merely resolving a single case of prejudice. She was determinedly leading a profound cultural transformation, one that would ripple across the industry, leaving behind a powerful legacy of fairness, inclusion, and respect. The audit results were finally ready to be discussed. As Amelia prepared for the meeting, a flicker of anxiety rose within her, but she quickly steadied herself. This was her moment of truth, the test to see if the changes she had fought so passionately for would become the transformative force she envisioned. As the meeting commenced, Amelia listened intently to the detailed report. The audit's findings were stark and undeniably troubling, yet exactly what she'd anticipated. Deep-rooted problems had come to light, unconscious biases permeating the airline's culture, outdated customer service practices, and a clear lack of diversity within leadership ranks. There was much work to be done, but Amelia saw beyond the initial discomfort. Within these painful truths, she saw an opportunity for genuine transformation. She leaned forward with resolve. "Let's fix this," she said firmly, her voice carrying unwavering determination. "We committed to becoming a better company, and that starts now. No more excuses, just decisive action." As the audit findings were shared with the board, Amelia felt a quiet but profound sense of purpose. The data revealed harsh realities, yet she was undeterred. Instead of being discouraged, she was energized. This was her chance, finally, to reshape the airline's future and embed principles of fairness and inclusion deeply into its core. Immediately following the meeting, Amelia scheduled a series of rigorous follow-ups with human resources, the legal team, and key department heads. Every policy would be thoroughly scrutinized, every hiring practice reevaluated, every internal protocol revised. This initiative was no longer solely about addressing Veronica Mills's mistake on that single flight. Now it was about creating an enduring legacy, building a company culture in which respect and inclusion were not merely buzzwords, but fundamental pillars of their daily operations. Despite intense media attention and public scrutiny, Amelia refused to be distracted. The pressure only strengthened her resolve. Having come so far, she knew there was no turning back. Amelia would personally lead her company through the storm, determined to emerge stronger on the other side. She envisioned the airline not merely surviving this ordeal, but becoming an industry leader in accountability and progressive change. The weeks that followed were relentless. An endless flurry of meetings, strategic calls, and constant updates. Amelia kept a meticulous eye on the implementation process within each department, ensuring every promised action materialized into tangible outcomes. She maintained direct communication with teams, conducting employee training programs, driving home the urgency behind their efforts. It wasn't easy. Resistance surfaced from certain corners of the organization. Some employees felt unsettled or threatened by the new policies. Amelia addressed these concerns head-on, remaining firm yet understanding. "This is a company-wide effort," she explained repeatedly. "If we're genuinely committed to changing this airline for the better, every single one of us must get on board. Those unwilling to embrace this change simply won't be part of the future we're building." Slowly but surely, Amelia observed tangible shifts taking root within the company. Though the work was far from finished, employees began genuinely engaging with the new direction. It became clear that this initiative was not just about resolving one isolated incident. It was about establishing an inclusive, respectful culture where every passenger and employee felt valued. Several months later, the airline began to see real, measurable results. Public feedback regarding the company's reforms was overwhelmingly positive. Customer complaints declined significantly, replaced by praise for the newfound commitment to inclusion and respectful service. Amelia noticed firsthand the change in passenger attitudes and reactions. People felt seen and respected in ways they previously had not. Employees who embraced the changes became champions of this new vision, their enthusiasm visible and infectious. Their commitment validated Amelia's relentless efforts, demonstrating that the cultural shift she'd envisioned was genuinely possible. One afternoon, Amelia stood before the boardroom, acknowledging the substantial progress made, But even in that moment of satisfaction, she recognized the journey was far from complete. "We've made incredible strides," she declared confidently. "But this isn't a finish line, it's just the start. Our dedication to fairness, inclusion, and genuine respect must be ongoing. It must become our permanent mindset." Afterward, Amelia stood quietly by the window in her office, watching planes glide smoothly into the sky. She felt an unexpected sense of peace. The journey had indeed been challenging, filled with obstacles and unanticipated pressures, but looking back at all they had achieved, she knew every struggle had been worthwhile. Reflecting on that day aboard the flight, when Veronica Mills had mistakenly judged her based on superficial assumptions, Amelia smiled softly. That painful incident had sparked a movement far beyond a single flight or employee. It had become the catalyst for meaningful, lasting change within the airline, ensuring an environment where everyone felt safe, valued, and respected. As she gazed thoughtfully into the distance, Amelia understood that the road ahead remained challenging. Yet she felt ready for whatever might come. She had built something more enduring than an airline. She had created a genuine movement for fairness and equality. This, Amelia realized, would be her lasting legacy. An airline where respect, accountability, and inclusion weren't just ideals, but daily realities. The sky was no longer simply the limit. It had become a place of infinite possibility. As Amelia Brooks stood quietly by her office window, watching another airplane ascend smoothly toward the horizon, she felt the weight of her entire journey settling gently upon her shoulders. She knew that what she'd faced aboard that flight, the embarrassment and anger, had ultimately been a profound catalyst, an opportunity disguised as a crisis. At first glance, the situation with Veronica Mills seemed like a simple misunderstanding, an isolated case of unfair judgment based on appearances and assumptions. But now, months later, after countless meetings, late-night strategy sessions, audits, training programs, and passionate debates, Amelia understood it as so much more. It had become a vivid illustration of the biases that could seep into even the most carefully constructed environments, quietly undermining core values if left unchecked. In confronting those biases head-on, Amelia had learned a lesson more valuable than any business strategy or management course could teach. True change requires confronting uncomfortable truths. The path toward lasting reform isn't paved with convenient promises or superficial adjustments. It's constructed painstakingly, brick by brick, through transparency, accountability, and relentless action. Her story had never been solely about the airline industry, or even about corporate culture. At its core, it had always been about dignity, about respect, about recognizing the fundamental humanity in every person, regardless of their age, appearance, or position. Amelia recognized now more profoundly than ever before that appearances could indeed be deceptive, leading individuals to judgments and assumptions that not only harmed others but also diminished their own integrity. Yet within that realization, Amelia also found immense hope. Hope born from witnessing the courage of passengers who had silently supported her that day. From the employees who initially resisted but gradually embraced change with sincerity. From the countless individuals who reached out through social media, emails, and phone calls, expressing solidarity and demanding accountability. Their collective voice had strengthened Amelia's resolve, reinforcing her belief that this wasn't merely her battle. It was a shared struggle, a collective mission to create environments rooted in fairness, equality, and respect. Standing at the window, Amelia reflected deeply on the true essence of leadership. She now understood leadership as a profound moral responsibility, not simply authority. Leaders didn't wait for problems to arise. They proactively created cultures of accountability and transparency. They addressed systemic issues before they became crises, not merely reacting when public opinion forced their hand. This profound sense of duty had guided Amelia's every step since that pivotal day. shaping her choices and steering her company toward a brighter, more inclusive future. She thought again of Gabriella, whose unwavering support had anchored her throughout this challenging journey. Gabriella's quiet strength reminded Amelia that change is never accomplished alone. It requires allies, people willing to listen deeply, challenge constructively, and stand unwaveringly by your side through every hardship and every triumph. Amelia understood, too, that genuine transformation isn't immediate or easy. It requires patience, persistence, and the courage to remain steadfast even when progress seems painfully slow. Yet, as she had already begun to see within her airline, each small step forward creates ripple effects, subtle shifts in perspective, changes in behavior, and eventually, lasting cultural transformation. The tangible improvements she witnessed among her employees, the feedback from satisfied passengers, and the positive media coverage validated her commitment to doing what was right, not merely what was convenient or easy. Now, with the first stages of reform successfully underway, Amelia knew the hardest work still lay ahead, maintaining momentum, staying true to her values, and never allowing complacency to creep back into the culture she was building. She understood clearly that accountability wasn't a single act. It was an ongoing commitment. The true measure of success wouldn't be in headlines or short-term praise, but in the enduring change that continued long after the initial incident had faded from public memory. Amelia had learned something else critical from this experience: the importance of speaking out. Silence, she'd realized, was often complicity. To remain silent in the face of unfairness meant allowing harmful assumptions and prejudices to continue unchecked. Her voice had inspired others to find theirs, to speak openly about experiences they'd long kept hidden. Her courage had created space for a broader, deeper dialogue around fairness, dignity, and genuine inclusion. As Amelia watched another airplane disappear gracefully into the clouds, she considered how symbolic this entire journey had become. Like a plane taking flight, achieving cultural change meant overcoming initial resistance, climbing steadily through moments of turbulence, and eventually reaching clearer skies, where equality, respect, and fairness could become the new normal. She realized, too, that her journey had only begun. The changes within her company represented a powerful start, but they weren't enough on their own. Amelia now felt a profound responsibility to continue advocating for change beyond the walls of her airline, to challenge the entire industry, and to inspire other companies to examine their practices honestly and thoroughly. Amelia turned back toward her office, energized with renewed purpose. Her story had begun as a deeply personal incident, but it had become a powerful call to action, a testament to the strength found in vulnerability, the courage required to challenge assumptions, and the potential each person has to spark meaningful, lasting change. To those who would follow her story, Amelia hoped to send a clear message: never underestimate your power to make a difference. Every voice counts. Every stand taken against prejudice, unfair treatment, or injustice creates a powerful ripple effect, challenging and reshaping cultural norms. The journey toward genuine equality and inclusion wasn't Amelia's alone. It belonged to all of them. To anyone willing to stand up, speak out, and demand better. Her airline had become more than just a business. It had transformed into a movement, a testament to what becomes possible when we refuse to accept complacency, when we demand accountability, and when we persist relentlessly in our pursuit of fairness. With a quiet sense of resolve, Amelia made a silent promise. This was not the end. It was merely a new beginning. Her commitment to respect, fairness, and accountability would continue indefinitely, shaping every decision, guiding every policy, and inspiring those around her. After all, Amelia Brooks now understood deeply there are no limits to what we can achieve when we act with courage, integrity, and compassion. And as she looked up once more at the endless blue sky stretching out beyond the horizon, she felt a profound sense of hope. Together, Amelia believed, they could rise higher, building a future defined not by assumptions or bias, but by the simple, powerful understanding that every person deserves dignity, respect, and fairness. The sky, after all, was limitless, not just for Amelia, but for everyone who dared to dream, who chose to act, and who believed that together, meaningful change was not only possible, but inevitable.